The main news on September 4th, in Paris, leaders and ministers from 26 countries agreed on a security guarantee framework for Ukraine. This is not just another communique. This is preparation for a real military mission on Ukrainian territory, with training, air defense, repair bases, and a unified command system, which they plan to finalize together with the United States in the coming days. The public tone is cautious, but the content has become quite clear. And it's important to discuss this topic without illusions, because there have been a lot of loud statements, but there are also some unpleasant nuances. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that 26 countries have confirmed their readiness to participate on land, at sea, or in the air, to reassure Ukrainian society to support the ceasefire as soon as it comes into effect and to ensure and guarantee peace. There are no limits to our support for Ukraine's defense. Macron specifically emphasized that Paris is talking about concrete details. Who will take responsibility for air defense? Who will handle training? Who will conduct naval missions and so on? But for now, these are once again loud statements that, although they have brought us closer to guarantees, there is still no finalized document. My name is Pechiy. Today is September 4th. Let's talk about this topic and summarize the results of the Paris summit of the Coalition of the Willing. What did we hear there? But what is really happening in practice before we begin? I want to remind you that every day on this YouTube channel, several news analysis segments are released, where we break down the main news of the day so that you stay informed about everything that's happening. So be sure to subscribe to this channel and don't forget to leave a like. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. On September 4th in Paris, the Zhiloy coalition met. Volodymyr Zelensky immediately dismissed all attempts to lay a time bomb and stated that we do not accept any paper guarantees like the Budapest Memorandum or any Minsk III agreements. Quote, Ukraine needs not declarations that can be crossed out tomorrow. We need long-term guarantees ratified by parliaments with legal force. We need concrete steps, air defense, production and supplies, training and the presence of partners, so that peace does not become just a pause before a new strike from Russia. Separately, Zelensky asked for maximum air defense, because night attacks mean lives that can only be saved by iron. Now let's get to the specifics. So, what did Paris bring to the summit, and why is this still a new step, no matter how much people are shouting about the summit's failure right now? Basically, France is pushing the coalition of the willing format, where each participant takes on a piece of the framework for those very guarantees. Some manage air defense and radars, others handle repairs and logistics, while others focus on cyber defense, electronic warfare, and more. The idea is to move all the heavy processes inside Ukraine so that the cycle of diagnostics, repair, and getting things back in service takes weeks instead of months. The crucial point is the truce with teeth must have real infrastructure, and most importantly, everything should be on Ukrainian territory. A promise that if there is new aggression, someone will come to help at some point. No, everything must be in Ukraine and on site. This is the shift from good intentions to duty rosters and responsible persons. So, where do the United States fit into this story? Macron said agreements with Washington will be finalized soon. Associated Press adds that the White House joined the discussions. Trump confirmed the United States' involvement in the architecture of guarantees. And in diplomatic terms, we're talking about intelligence, control, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. That's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. There's also the logistics and air defense support, which the United States will handle. Actually, this is a pretty convenient solution for everyone. Europe gets control over its own continent, Washington gets a less toxic format without sending combat units into the trenches, and Kyiv benefits as well. These are people and resources truly on the front lines, not just listed on paper. The political intrigue here is about who is for, who is against, and what exactly each side is promising. And here Reuters clearly records Macron's maneuver. When asked why Poland and Italy were previously against sending their troops into Ukraine, he will try to dodge the question. And he uses the following phrase, quote, different countries will take on different tasks. And in fact, that's the whole point of this coalition of the willing format. The goal isn't to argue, but to assign tasks based on each country's strengths. One manages air defense and training, another oversees the sea, another handles cyber defense, and so forth. And yes, Macron specifically said a phrase that all Europeans will be using: there are no restrictions on the defense of Ukraine. This is the new framework of expectations. Simply put, there's no need to hate the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, or the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, right now, who have publicly come out today and stated that they will not send their soldiers to Ukraine. Of course, this has already caused a stir, like all the allies have given up, but that's not the case. It's obvious that Italy will take on air defense issues for Ukraine, while Poland actually has a separate mission altogether. The thing is, Donald Trump has already stated that he doesn't plan to withdraw American troops from Poland. If the United States keeps its promise and takes responsibility for covering the Ukrainian skies, then all American aircraft and all air defense systems for this purpose will be based specifically in Poland. And it's obvious that the Poles themselves will partly be involved in this mission to cover the skies. That's why they are simply taking on a specific task, not sending their troops into Ukraine. Next, as they say, there's an elephant in the room: Moscow. When asked about his already publicized trip to Moscow by dictator Putin, Zelensky responded as follows: "This is exactly the kind of proposal that Moscow makes, fully understanding that it is unacceptable. We don't need meetings just for show. We need real peace and real guarantees." Well, as for peace talks, added Putin, he rejected all initiatives. But we think the opposite. Pressure works. Sanctions are putting pressure on Russia's economy, and this needs to be strengthened. This is an important junction with the European railway part, meaning the guarantees. Without this railway part, any ceasefire will become an invitation for revenge. Now, a little about sanctions. Otherwise, it won't be clear why Paris today is not just some press conference. So, at the coalition summit of willing countries on September 4, Trump's representative Steve Witkoff was present. And it was he who demanded that Europe completely abandon Russian gas and oil. Well, according to Zelensky and Macron, who spoke with Donald Trump today, the American president is unhappy that Slovakia and Hungary continue to buy Russian oil. And it is Trump who, by the way, can put pressure on Orban and Fico so that they finally start working in sync with Europe. They went to pay homage to the dictator Putin next. The Guardian and Associated Press today simultaneously described three components over the past few days that the Allies are including in that very block of guarantees: intensifying the hunt for the shadow fleet and insurance fraud schemes for Russian oil and gas exports. So this is the sanctions part. Next is strengthening Ukrainian air defense and radar in the Patriot, SMPT and RST systems, and relocating training and repairs to Ukraine. And together this does two things. First, it makes restoring the combat capability of the Ukrainian armed forces cheaper and faster. When the factory is nearby, you don't have to transport armor and radars across half of Europe. Second, this creates a cost for the Kremlin if they violate the ceasefire. Breaking the truce means striking at sites where Europeans are present. Politically, that's much more costly. And there's another layer about the sky and navigation. The story about Ursula von der Leyen's plane landing using paper maps after the global positioning system went down in Bulgaria was a real wake-up call. And today, Western media are reporting that NATO considers global positioning system jamming and spoofing a permanent threat and is preparing countermeasures. For the mission in Ukraine, this means some very practical things: increasing ground beacons, backup communication channels, standby air defense systems, strict regulations, and so on, which will later also be applied to European civil aviation. Basically, this episode showed Europeans why Ukraine is so persistent in demanding air cover for the country, and why this is important not only for Ukraine, but for all of Europe. Because essentially, Ukraine could become that very shield, that barrier, through which Russia will not be able to influence Europe in any way. What does all this change for Ukraine as soon as tomorrow? Well, let's put it this way. To be specific, the first thing is acceleration. If it's in September or October, the partners specify who will build repair hubs, handle training, oversee air defense, and more. Then, essentially, since winter, this cycle of combat recovery, that is, They basically need to build this whole architecture. And the second thing is resilience. During massive night attacks by Russian, the main savings, as strange as it may sound, are preserved substations, bridges, factories, infrastructure, and very importantly, the preservation of human lives. Accordingly, maximum air defense, which Zelensky talked about today, is not just a slogan. It's real people's lives and it's gross domestic product. It's the preservation of Ukraine's gross domestic product. And the third is, of course, politics. When 26 countries publicly say, we're taking this on, we're not just discussing it, we're starting to develop all the mechanisms, then the Kremlin's manipulations about Europe's fatigue from the war lose their value. And honestly, this is more important than any loud headlines. And as a conclusion, I want to say that today the Paris summit did what couldn't be done for a whole year. It shifted the focus from general words to engineering to developing plans. Of course, you could say that this is all just talk again, that it's all nonsense, that it doesn't mean anything. The difference is that before, these conversations sounded like slogans like, we're ready, that's it. The Europeans said, we're ready to guarantee Ukraine's security. If necessary, we're even considering the possibility of sending our troops to Ukraine. So all of this was about we're ready. Now, the discussion is not about if, but about how. And when Macron says that there are no restrictions on guaranteeing Ukraine, that's essentially a statement of commitment. And further on, it will be measured by the presence of air defense batteries, instructors, depots, fuel, trains, in Ukraine's case, trains with spare parts for military equipment and with weapons. And, which is very important, a clear distribution of roles. Who is responsible for what? No, generally all of Europe can provide guarantees, but there's no certainty about responsibilities. And if this framework is put together before winter, then any so-called peace initiatives from the Kremlin will sound like anything but peace. So it won't be possible to force a Ukrainian capitulation? No. And today's summit in Paris basically showed that finally we've moved on from slogans to some kind of action. I've always said that there are at least two levels of decision making, the political one and the actual practical one. Now we've moved on to the practical one. Because at the political level, everyone has already spoken out long ago. Everyone has expressed what they support. It's time not just to speak in slogans, but to act. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.